Hello everybody, welcome to Paestum, welcome to the participants of the Computability in Europe 2020. I know it's a different way to have a tour, but I hope we can meet again in a different way, and I hope you can come here. And let me introduce me. I'm Lucia, I'm an official guide in Paestum, and welcome to Paestum. This is a wonderful archaeological site. It's a great archaeological site. It's a big colony of Magna Graecia. And now let's go next to the temples, because I want to tell you something about the temples and this wonderful site. Poseidonia is the Greek name and was founded by the Greeks at the end of the 7th century BC, 600 BC. So when the Greeks were here, they loved this place because we are in a big plain, very rich in rivers, and we also have a mild climate, and they also wanted to stop here because of the sea, so they founded the colony, and they built the houses towards the sea, while in the middle there was a public area with the agora in the middle at the center, and two big sanctuaries with different several temples, of which we can still see 3 of them. And now we are into the southern sanctuary. We can see the first of the 3 temples to be built, the temple which dates back to the middle of the 6th century BC, while this is the bigger one. This dates to the middle, more or less, to the middle of the 5th century BC. And at the end of the walking tour, we are going to enjoy the second one to be built, which is the smaller one, the Temple of Athena, which dates back to the beginning of the 6th century BC. After a few centuries, the Lucanians were here. They were an Italic population. They were here between the 5th and the 4th century BC. They called Poseidonia Paestum. And after that, the Romans came here at the beginning of the 3rd century BC. I forgot to tell you why the colony was called Poseidonia. The colony was called Poseidonia because of the sea god Poseidon. So, when the Romans came here, they reused the same temples. You know that Romans and Greeks had the same deities, but they also built new houses, an amphitheater, and other buildings, public buildings. And the colony fell into decline very slowly because of the end of the Roman Empire, because of the mosquitoes, and at the end because of the Saracens, which were here in the 9th century AD. So the inhabitants of Paestum ran away. They left the coast. They moved on the hills to be safe. So, and the first official archaeological excavations, digs, only began very late. Firstly, a lot of scholars were here in the 18th, 19th centuries, but they only started to excavate at the end of the 19th century. And our temples were here, they were visible. I want to underline that all you can see, it's authentic. No column was rebuilt. The columns you can see are still the original ones. And this made great this archaeological site. There is no site in the world, in Magna Graecia or in Greece, where you can see, where you can enjoy 3 temples as were preserved, as here in Paestum. So, the first temple, the first of the 3 temples to be built, the so-called Basilica, which is instead a temple dedicated to Hera, Zeus' wife. The temple, I told you before, dates back to the middle of the 6th century BC. It's a Doric temple. In this archaeological site, we have 3 temples which are in a Doric style. Probably you remember that in the Greek architecture we have 3 different styles: Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian style. The Doric is the simplest. It's very easy to recognize this style when you look up the column and you look the capital. The upper part, consists of 2 slabs, a quadrangular slab which is called abacus, and a circular one which is called aichino. And there is also a little frame at the back, under. We have 9 by 18 lateral columns, and you know that a temple was the house of the god on the earth. So people, the pilgrims, could enter the temple. They could have a walk all around the columns. They couldn't enter the naos, which is the shrine of a temple, the place where the statue of the deity to whom the temple was dedicated was kept. In the naos only the priests and the priestess could enter, so that the religious life took place outside, here in the place where we are now. And you can see the sacred altars, so everywhere you can see the bases, which are sacred altars for sacrifices of animals. And it's a mystery. We don't know yet the deity to whom this temple was dedicated. We call this temple the so-called Basilica. It's not a basilica. You know, the basilica during the Roman age was the justice palace. The archaeologists, the first archaeologists, were wrong. This is probably a temple dedicated to Hera, I told you before, and we suppose that thanks to the digs, during the digs, the archaeologists discovered a sequence of deep wells containing all around the temple. In these deep wells, there were a lot of terracotta votive offerings, which represented the goddess Hera, sat on a throne because she was the queen of the Olympus, and in her hand she had the pomegranate, which was the symbol of fertility, and she was the goddess of maternity, of the weddings, fertility. So it's probably a temple dedicated to Hera. And now let's have a walk around, because I want to show you the defense walls. Can you see over there? We have big blocks. The part you can see is the southern side of the defense walls, which were built by the Lucanians between the 5th and the 4th century BC. They are about 3 miles long, and there were 28 watchtowers and 4 entry gates to the south, to the north, to the east, and to the west. They are so impressive, so long. Now we are at the back side of the temple, the west side, because you know that the Greek temples were always oriented from east, where you can see the beautiful mountains, to west, towards the sea in this case, as following the sun. And here you can also see this beautiful road, that was firstly a Greek road and then a Roman road. You can still see the original floor. This was the main cardo, the road running from south to the north. And at the end of the road, there were 2 of the 4 entry gates. The Justice Gate to the south, and the northern gate that was called the Golden Gate. While here you can see the remaining parts, the foundation walls of the Roman houses. The houses were built towards the sea. And here we are, the so-called Temple of Neptune, the last one to be built here in Poseidonia Paestum, 450 BC more or less. It's a great temple, an amazing temple. This is one of the best preserved temple in a Doric style in the Greek world, together with the Temple of Concordia, which is in Agrigento. So we are very, very proud. And we have 6 by 14 lateral columns. Let's go next to the temple. Please follow me, because I want to show you the interior, which is very well preserved. We still have the columns of the naos. It's splendid. You can see the interior. You can see that we have 2 orders of columns. in two levels. The house inside was divided into three naves. You can see here, the central nave divided by two rows of columns in a double order. At the top of the second order of the columns, you can imagine there was a wooden ceiling and then a wooden sloping roof. The temples were covered. So the house was surrounded by walls. All around there were walls and there were no windows. There was a door for entering, so the house inside was dark. And the statue that was at the back side in the middle was lit by candles, braziers, or by the first sun, as the Greek temples were oriented from east to west. So imagine the magical atmosphere in the morning when the priests opened the door and the first sun lit the big statue, an amazing statue. Please have a look again to the double order, bigger columns at the bottom and smaller columns at the top. We don't know yet the deity to whom this temple was dedicated. It's again a mystery. The first archaeologists who were here believed the temple was dedicated to Poseidon, as this is the bigger one, but they were wrong, as the port of Poseidonia was built 10 kilometers down the coast, and the temple dedicated to the sea god was next to the port, not so far. It made no sense. So, probably was a temple dedicated to Hera again, Hera the first and Hera the second. We suppose Hera because the archaeologists discovered a lot of terracotta votive offerings, the same terracotta votive offerings I told you before that represented the goddess Hera. Probably Apollo or Zeus. It's a mystery. We are so sorry, but at the moment we cannot tell you more. Now we are in the Forum. We are in the Roman age. The Forum was the main square. You see, it's a very big square, very large, very long, rectangular in shape. Imagine that at the time, this square was surrounded by porches. The four sides were surrounded by porches. And here, the Romans built several public buildings and a lot of shops for shopping. Here you can see the remaining parts of a new temple, very small. There was also a political building, and over there, where you can see the walls with a few traces of red frescoes at the bottom, you can see the remaining part of the Justice Palace and enjoy the beautiful view on the so-called Temple of Neptune. So the square was one of the main places, one of the most beautiful places at the time, monumental place of the time. But unfortunately, if you look around you, you can only see few ruins, as until 18 years ago, the local inhabitants came here and they stolen the blocks. They recycled the blocks of the structures to build new houses, walls. But you know, this is typical everywhere you go. And here it is, the Amphitheater. We are again during the Roman age. We are outside this structure that was built 2000 years ago, more or less. We can see the exterior, we can see the steps. We have a beautiful double flight of steps that was used by the spectators for reaching the top of the steps of the tiers. And all around, you can still see the basis of the original pillars. You can see the original terracotta bricks. The Romans used terracotta bricks outside, but not inside, so they were smart. Inside, they used cement, fragments of bricks and stones, so rubbish. But let's go inside to see the interior, but don't forget that like all the amphitheaters, there were two orders of pillars. Imagine pillars, arches, and again pillars that supported arches. So two levels of pillars that supported two levels of arches. So this was an amazing structure at the time. And now we are inside the amphitheater that was the place where the gladiators fought against other gladiators or against wild animals, but not in this case because it's very small. This was very small. You can see the seats, but these are only the lowest seats. Probably you know that there were two different sections. Ima, Media and Summa Cavia. The lowest part was reserved for the most important citizens. The upper parts were reserved for plebeians and women. And you probably know that the amphitheaters were always elliptical in shape. But what happened to our amphitheater? Sadly, in 1829, an engineer cut in two parts the amphitheater. You can see the road just in front of me. We have the road that was cut in 1829. At the time, this was an important road to join Naples with the southern part of Calabria. But what a pity! He was crazy to cut the road, to build the road inside an archaeological site. He could see our temples, but he didn't care. This could happen at the time. So the remaining parts are still under the road and in a private garden. Imagine the amphitheater was bigger, double than the part we can see today. And here we are. We are next to another important building here in Poseidonia, Paestum. This was a Heron. The Heron was a cenotaph, a commemorative building built in honor of an important figure. He was the founder of the settlement that was considered like a hero. And this building that looks like a little house, a small house, was discovered in 1954, and the archaeologists wanted to go inside, to enter inside from the roof. And what a surprise! Inside there were beautiful vases, bronze vases, and also a magnificent terracotta black figure amphora. These were important findings. We can see the vases into the museum. In few minutes there will be the surprise, another surprise for you. The most important exhibits into the museum. And this is the so-called Temple of Ceres, which is instead a temple dedicated to Athena. The temple was built at the beginning of the 6th century BC. This is the smaller one. We have 6 by 13 lateral columns. It's also a perfection. It's a perfect temple as the Greeks had a canonical rule. In the classical age, when they built the temples, they had an even number of columns at the facade, and on both lateral sides the columns were double plus 1, so the perfection is here, 6 by 13. It's a temple dedicated to Athena. We know that always thanks to the findings. Again, the archaeologists discovered the statues, the terracotta votive offerings that represented the goddess Athena with an helmet, a shield, as she was the goddess of wars, of warfare. And this temple, which is very well preserved again, is in a Doric style, but inside there were the columns into a Ionic style, so it's unique in this case, double style in the same structure. And again on the back side, the east side, please look up. You can see a beautiful frame at the top, a square frame, and you see the metops. In the Doric style, the frieze was composed by triglyphs and metops. Suddenly, we have simple metops, or we don't have metops. We don't know if the metops were sculptured or not, if the metops were here or not. We don't have the metops. Our temples have no metops. The metops were generally decorated with low reliefs that represented mythological scenes, deities. In the museum we can see something special. Here we enjoyed the special temples, but into the museum we will have a special surprise again. And how did I manage to build these big constructions? We suppose that the stone quarries, we know that the stone quarries were not so far from here. They cut the blocks, and our temples were built with our local stone, which is the limestone. So, firstly, they cut the blocks, they got the blocks up to here by carts, and then they used the special long earth ramps, or to put the blocks one at the top of the other blocks with the cranes, wooden cranes. And after that, they had to sculpture the flutes, and then they had to plaster the whole structure in white, as the temples were white, like white marble. In this region we don't have white marble. Importing white marble from Greece was too expensive, so they used the local stone, the limestone, but covering in white the structure. The structure looked like white marble, and the white color was the base for the decorations at the top, as the temples were always highly decorated. The top was generally black, red, white, sometimes blue. There were geometrical patterns, flowers, lionets, and also beautiful drains. And here we are into the museum. Let me show you these splendid metops, which date back to the 6th century BC. These are the most ancient we have in Magna Grecia, together with the metops that come from Selinunte in Sicily. They decorated the frieze of an ancient temple, which was into a sanctuary built 10 kilometers towards north, a sanctuary dedicated to the goddess Hera, and they represented mythological scenes such as Hercules or Ulysses or the Iliad. So they are very, very important. Do you remember when I told you about the vases that were discovered into the Heron and the archaeological site, the Cenotaph, the commemorative building built for the founder of Poseidonia? I told you about the vases. Here they are, splendid vases which date back to the 6th century BC. And you can see we have bronze vases which are finely decorated with horses, lions, sphinxes, and palm leaves and heads, ships. And there is also a magnificent terracotta black figure, amphora. It's an Attic terracotta black figure amphora that represents Hercules, who is entering to the Olimpo together with Athena, Apollo, Hermes, and Artemis. You will be surprised to note that in these vases, the archaeologists discovered a few traces of honey that was still intact after 2,500 years, more or less. Here it is, the crystallized honey. So this is one of the most important finding here in Poseidonia, Paestum. Splendid vase, so finely decorated and so modern. And this is our masterpiece. This is the famous Divers tomb. It's an important exhibit that was founded in 1968 here in Paestum. This is a Greek tomb. It's like a chest tomb, like a box, which you can see two long sides, two short sides, and in the middle you can see the top. This tomb is called the diver's tomb, the tomb of the diver, because of the main subject. You can see a diver who is diving from stone pillars into the sea. The sea can be considered the ocean, and you know that the ancient Greeks didn't know what the ocean was. So the ocean was the unknown world. So the diving from the pillars into the ocean can be considered like the diving into the afterlife. While on both lateral sides you can see men who are taking part to a special banqueting that was called symposium. And you see that everybody is doing something different. So why this tomb is so important? It's so important as this is the unique fresco which dates back to the beginning of the 5th century BC, belonging to the Greek word that represents human subjects, the unique into the world. So, come here and you will be surprised to enjoy all these beautiful exhibits and extraordinary monuments. I'll show the before to you. Come to Paestum. We wait for you.